Greetings to all. The dimensions of cells and intercellular spaces will be discussed in this video, but first, let's define what a cell is to begin with. A cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all living organisms. It is the smallest independently functioning unit of life. Cells are the building blocks of life, and all organisms, from simple single-celled microorganisms to complex multicellular organisms like humans, are made up of cells. Plant cells are typically much larger than animal cells, with diameters ranging from 10 to 100 micrometer. Plant cells also have a rigid cell wall, which gives them their shape and provides support. The intercellular space in plant tissues is also typically larger than in animal tissues. This is because plants need to exchange gases and water with the environment, and the intercellular space provides a pathway for this exchange.
Plant cells are very much like animal cells. They also contain organelles, such as the nucleus, cell membrane, cytoplasm, vacuoles, and mitochondria. But plant cells have a few additional parts. One of these is a cell wall. A cell wall is a tough layer outside of the cell membrane that gives the plant its strength and stiffness. This helps the plant cell keep its shape. Another part of the plant cell that is not found in an animal cell is the chloroplast. Chloroplasts help plant cells produce energy. Chloroplasts use water, carbon dioxide, and light from the sun to create a type of sugar known as glucose. Glucose acts as food for a plant.
Animal cells are typically smaller than plant cells, with diameters ranging from 8 to 10 micrometer. Animal cells do not have a cell wall, but they do have a cell membrane, which separates the cell interior from the outside environment. The intercellular space in animal tissues is typically smaller than in plant tissues. This is because animal cells do not need to exchange gases and water with the environment to the same extent as plant cells.
Every animal cell has a nucleus. The job or function of the nucleus is to control the other parts of the cell. The nucleus is a lot like your brain. Just as your brain sends messages to the various parts of your body, the nucleus sends messages to the other parts of the cell. The purpose of vacuoles is to store nutrients, such as sugars, for the cell. Vacuoles also store water and wastes. Cells need to break down the sugar that the vacuoles store. Breaking down the sugar is the job of the mitochondria. When the mitochondria breaks down the sugar, energy is released. This energy helps the cell carry out all its functions. Each animal cell is surrounded by a cell membrane. The cell membrane controls which substances enter and leave the cell. It also protects the cell. Cells are filled with a watery, jelly-like fluid called cytoplasm. Cytoplasm fills the cell, allowing the other parts of the cell to stay in place. Cytoplasm also helps a cell keep its shape.
Here are some examples of the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular space in agricultural materials. Wheat grain cells. Wheat grain cells are about 20 to 30 micrometer in diameter. The intercellular space in wheat grain is about 1 to 2 micrometer wide. Soybean seed cells. Soybean seed cells are about 20 to 40 micrometer in diameter. The intercellular space in soybean seed is about 2 to 3 micrometer wide. Chicken breast muscle cell. Chicken breast muscle cells are about 10 to 15 micrometer in diameter. The intercellular space in chicken breast muscle is about 0.5 to 1 micrometer wide. Let us also talk about the importance of the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular space in agricultural materials. The dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular space in agricultural materials are important for a variety of reasons. For example, the size and shape of cells can affect the quality of food products. The intercellular space can also affect the processing and storage of agricultural materials. For example, the size and shape of wheat grain cells can affect the milling and baking properties of wheat flour. The size and shape of soybean seed cells can affect the crushing and oil extraction properties of soybeans. The intercellular space in chicken breast muscle can affect the water-holding capacity and cooking properties of chicken breast meat. Changes in the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular space in agricultural materials can be a sign of disease or stress. For example, changes in the size and shape of wheat grain cells can be a sign of drought stress. Changes in the intercellular space in chicken breast muscle can be a sign of inflammation. By understanding the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular space in agricultural materials, we can develop better methods for processing, storing, and transporting these materials. We can also use this information to develop new food products and to identify and manage diseases in plants and animals. Now, let's proceed to the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces of agricultural and biosystems materials can be characterized by their size, shape, and distribution. Cell size can vary widely depending on the type of cell and the organism it comes from. For example, plant cells are typically much larger than animal cells. Cell shape can also vary widely, from spherical to rod-shaped to cuboidal. The distribution of cells within a tissue can also be important, as it can affect the function of the tissue. For example, cells in muscle tissue are typically arranged in a parallel fashion, which allows them to contract more effectively. Intercellular spaces. Intercellular spaces are the spaces between cells. The size and shape of intercellular spaces can also vary depending on the type of tissue. For example, epithelial tissues have very little intercellular space, while connective tissues have a lot of intercellular space. The distribution of intercellular spaces can also be important, as it can affect the movement of fluids and gases through the tissue. For example, the intercellular spaces in a blood vessel are large enough to allow blood cells to pass through, but small enough to prevent plasma from leaking out. The dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces are important for a number of reasons. First, they can affect the function of tissues and organs. For example, the size and shape of cells in a muscle tissue can affect how much force the muscle can generate. Second, the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces can affect the transport of fluids and gases through tissues. For example, the size and distribution of intercellular spaces in a blood vessel can affect blood flow. Third, the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces can affect the interactions between cells and their environment. For example, the size and shape of cells in a plant leaf can affect how much sunlight the leaf can absorb. Here are some examples of how the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces can be important in agricultural and biosystems materials. The size and shape of cells in a plant leaf can affect how much sunlight the leaf can absorb. This is important for photosynthesis, which is the process by which plants use sunlight to convert carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and glucose. The size and distribution of cells in a muscle tissue can affect how much force the muscle can generate. This is important for animals, as it allows them to move and interact with their environment. The size and distribution of intercellular spaces in a blood vessel can affect blood flow. This is important for all animals, as it allows blood to transport oxygen and nutrients to cells and remove waste products. The size and shape of cells in a plant seed can affect how quickly the seed germinates. This is important for agriculture, as it allows farmers to plant crops and harvest them at specific times of the year. The size and distribution of intercellular spaces in a food product can affect how quickly the food spoils. This is important for food safety, as it allows consumers to eat safe food. The dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces can be measured using a variety of techniques, including microscopy, spectroscopy, and image analysis. These techniques can be used to study the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces in a variety of agricultural and biosystems materials. This information can be used to improve the quality and safety of food, develop new materials for agriculture and industry, and understand the biology of plants and animals. In conclusion, the dimensional characteristics of cells and intercellular spaces are fundamental in both agricultural and biosystems materials. Cell biology is not only about understanding life on a microscopic scale, but also about sustaining and enhancing the world's food supply. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions or would like to explore this topic further, please feel free to reach out. We hope you gained valuable insights into the fascinating intersection of cell biology and agriculture.